so that we had a system and a way to track it. So I had done like a little bit of programming, just kind of curiously, since like high school. I just thought it was neat. I read a little bit about it. So I just got way in the weeds with like Python and some programming language stuff and thought, let's figure this out. And I wrote a little program that would check the entire list of what Eastman's digital library had numerically, and then cross-reference that with what we had uploaded, cross-loaded from them. And that would at least tell us what they had done that we didn't have, as long as we had like a numbering system from that point forward. Like we would use their numbers on our site. So there's a little bit of legwork to sort of implement a system, but once you did that, you could always automatically check, okay, these are new and we haven't done these yet, instead of just, guessing or going by composer.
I had a wonderful time talking with today's guest, and we covered all kinds of territory on many fronts. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we're talking today with Isaac Trapkus, who is a bassist in the New York Philharmonic, and we certainly talk about his path to that. Which, if you look at, I've said this so many times on the podcast, but if you just look at the bio, you don't realize all the struggles and the auditions you didn't win and the lessons that you learned but might not be obvious. We get into all of that. But we also, and this is why Isaac originally reached out to me, we get into Isaac's kind of other career, not really a career, but the other thing he has spent a lot of time doing, which is IMSLP, the online sheet music library. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And Isaac has been one of the people behind this. It's really a cool story of how he got involved with this and has continued to be involved with it. And also thoughts on music education in general, volunteerism, digital publishing, free outlets like IMSLP, paid outlets like what we're doing with the sheet music store, and just making a living as an artist in general. I think no matter what you're doing in the music world, you're going to get something out of this. Definitely check out the links, which I talked through with Isaac. We've got a link to his IMSLP profile page, also his New York Philharmonic page. Check that out. Another page he recommends, the username is Thingy Person. And I clicked into that and I was like, oh my goodness, look at all this great stuff. If you want to get involved with IMSLP and aren't sure where to start, Isaac would love to let you know. And we've got his email linked up there. It's icactusmusic@gmail.com, but that's also linked up in the show notes. And he also put out an edition of Bach's Third Cello Suite that he put out to coincide with this episode. So that is linked up in our show notes as well. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, and Modacity. More on them later. Let's dig into this conversation with Isaac Trapkus. How's it going, Isaac?
Hey.
Hey.
Wow, this is really happening.
Yeah, it's happening. All right. How's life?
Life is, some days it's good. Some days it's like, what is going on? So...
I'm sure. So it is. I was just talking to somebody in Melbourne right now. So that not the same time zone, I don't think, but closer than here. Anyway, so what time is it for you? It's like 9 a.m. or something?
9 a.m. Yeah, just enough that my head is working, but... You're
probably used to 10 a.m. rehearsals, so at least 9 a.m. isn't too...
Right. It's been a little while, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet. So you're just chilling in Korea for a while concerts aren't happening?
Yeah, my wife is on a research leave. She teaches the professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And so she was supposed to be here for the entire calendar year starting in 2020. So mm-hmm. This was supposed to be like January and so obviously COVID hit and everything changed. And we thought, oh, that's great. You're going to be in the US. It's much better because things are not good in Korea early 2020. Mm-hmm. Surprise, scene change. Now, the tables are flipped. So it was right around November that she finally got approval to start her leave. So she came out here, and by then we knew we weren't doing any concerts for the entire year. Mm-hmm. So then I followed her out here so we could at least be together for that stretch. And we're supposed to start concerts again in the fall, as long as everything in-person concerts. Mm-hmm. And vaccine rollout seems to be happening. So I don't know how much time delay there is between, when you put this out and what's going on now, but it'll be different, but we'll be at least ideally playing in person again then.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's usually like a month or something. It's funny, or a couple months, depends on, but it's funny, like when COVID hit, I had this very tone deaf content coming out because I'm always a couple months ahead in terms of content. So we're talking about the next event and this and that, and then Well, how are things over there now? Like is the pandemic raging, or is it calmer there? Or
here, everyone has to wear a mask everywhere outside all the time, and the only time you can not have a mask on is if you're in your own home or if you are eating in a restaurant, which is a bit ironic feeling, because you're like, wait, we're going to be in a restaurant, there's going to be other people,
right.
But that was their effort to avoid making too many drastic compromises and changes in who can stay open, who cannot. So they've had to tick their scale up as things got worse, and then bring it back down as things got better. But it's never been more than 1,000 cases a day, and this is a country of 30-40 million people,
and
so
pretty dense country too, I imagine, right?
So it just walking around and seeing everybody with their mask, and I mean, this was, at the very beginning, they were all using they have KF94 masks here. I'm guessing the reason that they make 94 and not 95 is that the 95s and above can be saved for essential workers. A 94 does not meet that threshold. So it's the highest you could make for a consumer without stomping on the market that hospitals would need. So that seems very clever, but no one has cloth masks at all. You can't wear them. And it really makes me wonder, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I just wonder those kind of small distinctions, what kind of large scale effect that is having or not having. And as everyone's understanding of this changes so much, from month to month, it makes you think like, boy, if we knew what we knew here and then, where would we be? And
who knows? Yeah. Well, it's probably the same in New York, but all masks all the time here in San Francisco or California in general. Stuff's kind of open. Concerts, the symphony, I think that's the same plan for them. They're going to start in-person concerts in the fall. The governor just said June 15th is the day that California will reopen, completely, but all masks all the time still. So, and who knows what that means. And he's also being recalled. So I think he's in a little bit of a hurry to try to open things up after being pretty severely locked down. So we'll see. I mean, at least here we have a fairly nice climate all the time. So music, not the symphony, but music is happening in fits and spurts and around. And my friends that play jazz gigs and smaller gigs, stuff's trickling back. I turned down my first gig in over a year a couple days ago, so that was kind of a fun moment. Not fun moment, but it was a notable moment.
Normalizing. It's a
normalizing moment. There we go. Wow. How long have you been in the Philharmonic?
I started in 2016.
Okay.
And I was at Detroit Symphony for a season before. So that was my first full-time job, 2015. And then 2016 since I've been with the Philharmonic. I have to say, an incredibly important part of my Detroit audition winning process was the contrabass conversation you did with Alex Hanna.
Well, that would make sense, I guess.
Where he talked about his time in the hall and how he would go and just hours play in the space. And I just thought, I need to find ways to do all of that, in my world, because I don't have a hall, I don't have a full-time job yet. What do I do? So when I was doing all my little freelance things, I'd show up an hour and a half, before and just run stuff in these weird, unfamiliar spaces. And everything he said was that was great. If you're going to put a link to anything in the description, I don't have any social media, so link to that or link to his stuff. What a great guy.
That was so nice of Alex to do that, because he and I were teaching at DePaul at the time, and I had, I kind of have had two podcasts. I had this podcast I did back in the mid 2000s, and then I got a full-time high school teaching job and just quit doing it for a bunch of years. And then I decided to restart it. And so then the other 600 episodes that I've done since have been all that, but that was the very first reboot. And I just said hey, Alex, I want to get this thing going again. And he's like, oh yeah, I listened to that in high school a little bit, back in 2007 or whatever. So I went over to his place, and I'd been so long since I did one. I couldn't even find my microphones. So I found something, and I think the gear I brought didn't work. So I had my backup, my iPad recording. So that was just my iPad, but that was the first of a whole bunch. But that was, and that was, he's such a focused guy. I mean, and anybody who gets to a spot where he is or where you are has to have that focus. But I just remember that it was the first time I ever sat down with him and really talked through his journey. And I was just wow. I mean, at that point he was not drinking any caffeine, not drinking any alcohol. He was just drinking water. He's like, you want to have some water? And I'm like, yeah, Alex, let's have some water. So he just sat there and he's just like talking about CrossFit and talking, just like, wonderful guy, but just that focus, just, I was just struck by that talking to him.
Well, I think it's one thing to have the preparatory skills to be able to get yourself into a job, talent, practice, whatever. But then there's a separate skill set in the sort of pedagogical, the ability to take what you know and make it meaningfully communicable to people who need it. And so I just felt really fortunate I drove to Chicago from the East Coast and took some lessons with him. I guess at the time I was in Detroit. So I did one long trip and then one shorter trip in preparation, and just his ability to do that, to do both those things and articulate them in ways that you need, at your level, really, really impressive. And to just bang that stuff out too. Like I'm not one of those people who can just pick up an instrument and just, here, let me demonstrate this. Let me demonstrate this on your bass. Let me demonstrate this cold. Oh, you want to hear that excerpt? Boom. That's the most inspiring stuff I ever see, is people who can do that and do it well and then communicate it well.
Yeah, he's something special. I feel so fortunate to have taught at DePaul, like with Alex and Rob Kassinger from the Chicago Symphony, and like how the heck I ended up doing that is like a weird mystery for sure. But I feel so fun, and it was so fun to like see these audition forms, and it's like my name listed with Alex's, and it's like if anybody ever marked me first, I knew they weren't getting in because they didn't know what they were doing. It's like I will happily play third fiddle to these, and it was especially fun doing the audition what do you call it? Auditions for incoming students. The three of us would listen to everybody, and I'm like, all right, what's my role here? I'll be the computer guy. I'll be the person to enter all this stuff. I think that's probably the best. And the first year Alex joined the faculty, he showed up and he had a notepad and he was wearing his sport jacket and everything and really proper. And Rob came in like his biking gear or something. And so we sit down and the first person comes in and it is like the worst bass playing, maybe not the worst bass playing you ever heard, but pretty rough. And Alex is like taking notes and Rob is just sort of sitting there vacantly staring. And then the guy leaves and then Rob just turns to Alex and says, yeah, that's pretty much the best audition we've had in years. And you just see Alex's face get like the color drain out. He's like, what did I sign on to? And then Rob is like, nah, just kidding. So I had some good moments. We could eat up hours just entertaining stories from that, but that's really cool. So that's a long way of saying like, that's so awesome that was helpful.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I met him at Interlochen. We're about the same age. So I was working as a counselor there one summer, and that was his senior year. And so I, saw him with the orchestra, and I walked up to him afterwards, like, "Hey, that was really good." I mean, I'm from Iowa originally, and I just at that time in my life had not been exposed. I was about to go to college, so just senior in high school myself. I had not been exposed to a lot of really any other like good bass players, and so just to kind of get to go to one of those environments for your first time and be around really good musicians and just see that and start to make those connections. I mean, I would not have guessed that all these years later, here he is. Well, I mean, I probably would have guessed that he'd be in a major job. But just that, our paths would cross all these different ways later. And for him to be the kind of guy he is then, to be like, oh yeah, hi, random guy. Cool. Yeah, sure. Here's my email address. Yeah,
yeah,
like that. We really need to celebrate that kind of, maybe it's a bass thing, but that educator attitude and welcomingness that seems to be a common bass thing.
It's a bass thing, but he's definitely a great example of that. He's just like good people all the way. Where are you from in Iowa?
Davenport, Quad Cities.
Okay. So I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So I'm on the opposite side of the state. But so you're from more populous Iowa than mine.
The very populous quad. We have to put our four cities together to call it, one mini metropolis.
Well, when I lived in Chicago for a long time, a big thing in Chicago was that people discovered Quad Cities pizza. And so these Quad Cities pizza places started opening up, and the bathrooms were labeled like Dukes and Danes or something. It was like this whole Quad Cities lingo that I don't know. Maybe I might be remembering it wrong, but I remember they had this pizza that you cut with scissors, and it was like maybe they were just lying and they said it was Quad Cities pizza, but
there is an inflated sense of like innovation and we invented this, in Quad Cities-ness. So I don't know if that's like, I mean, there are famous places, but usually you find out, oh no, they had that elsewhere. Like there was some attitude that we had invented pineapple Canadian bacon pizza. Like that was some Iowa innovation like in the Quad Cities. Maybe that's true. I really feel like that's not true.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot with places that are maybe not the premier destination city. Like I'm from a much smaller version of that, of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but we were like the Manhattan of South Dakota, like that was the big city. And so like there are all these things that I thought like, wow, this doesn't happen anywhere in the country. And they're like, no, it does. We're fine. Wow. And then Michigan, right? You went to Michigan with Diana?
So I studied with her sister, Linda Gannett, in the Quad Cities. She's also a bass player. And that was my start. And I was thinking, I'll go to University of Iowa, where Diana is teaching at the time. And that year, this was 2002, I graduated high school. So she goes to University of Michigan that year. And I go, okay, maybe I will change my concept of what I wanted to be doing and going and like look into this now. I had heard so much about her, and I'd been to one clinic at University of Iowa as a high school student. And that was the first time that I'd been around other bass players, and the importance of these things you just can't understate. But to see her there, and she's such a warm, wonderful person, and makes you feel like there are no limits on the musical aspirations or explorations you want to do. And I had heard that from other people I knew. So I thought, okay, Michigan sounds like, it's a great school. Let me see where this goes and follow this path. And it was such a wonderful time. And I can't say enough good things about Diana, her approach, her conception of education, all that stuff. I got tons of excerpts, stuff down my throat later on in my life. And maybe, more of that younger would have been, also good. But to look at a student and get a student where they are and figure out what they need is really a skill set that I think far too often it's easy to take talented kids or kids who are already very good and make the little adjustments to, move them up. But to take somebody wherever they are and make a drastic improvement, those are the kind of teachers I think that are much more unsung and much more, that to me is the professional accomplishment. And she just was excellent at that.
She gave me some advice. I think I asked her I don't remember what I asked her exactly, but she said, like, it was something along the lines of, the music business is so tough, the odds are so low, like, what do you, and she just gave this very positive advice. She says, like, when you're trying to figure out what to do in your life, just what do you wake up and find fascinating? Do that. When you wake up, what fascinates you? Chase that. And I think that's really good advice. I've thought about that over the years, and I think I've applied that to my own life, or I like to think I have anyway. But boy, I've only crossed paths with her a few times. My first year moving here to San Francisco, she came out for the Golden Gate Bass Camp. And so we got to play, teach, and again, she did a lot of playing that week, and it was cool to hang out with her and see her teach, and wonderful person. So then Juilliard, Detroit, get in New York, Phil. So, if you want, regardless of when excerpts come into your life, if you look at what you've done, seems like your path has worked out pretty well in terms of that.
There's a lot of years in between. So I was not I did not do the Curtis to Philadelphia Orchestra, the in and out.
Right.
I finished, my master's was done 2008. So I did a master's at Juilliard with Eugene Levinson for 2 years. And that was when we also did a lot of solo. There was like a concerto competition the first year. And so Levinson was like, you'd be great for this. Let's really just spend a lot of time on this. And I was thinking, like, I thought we were going to do excerpts. I need to win a job. I've never played any excerpts. We had an orchestra rep class at Michigan with Stephen Molina, who was the assistant principal at Detroit. That was great. That was like 2 semesters. So I felt really behind. But so we did a lot of solo stuff. We did excerpts my last year. But that's 2008 that I'm out of school. And from then until, 2015, it was freelancing. It was lots of no's. It was lots of early round no's. It was advancing maybe once or twice, and just having to take a really hard look at, where am I in my playing? What am I doing? What am I not understanding about my playing that other people are concluding very quickly? Like, I'm thinking I'm working on these things and fixing stuff. You go to an audition, you get told no. Sometimes you get some comments, and sometimes you go home wondering, man, I'm not hearing it. I'm not understanding, like, where do I troubleshoot? And I think for a lot of young bass players, that ends up being the end. Like, I was very close. I mean, I turned 30 and I was not working full time anywhere. And I thought, at some point I need to start thinking, where maybe am I better served? What other things? I still think that all the time. I mean, that's part of life. I think it's good to also think about, what am I doing? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing something else? But that approach. So the main catalyst, and hopefully this is something that, listeners or aspiring professional classical bassists can get some reassurance from. Was 2012, that was the New York Phil audition where they had 4 openings. And I thought, okay, so many spots, just, you don't have to be the best. You just have to be, the acceptable bar. I go in, I play 2 excerpts. They say, thank you. And I walk out, and I was just devastated. And so I call my wife at home and I say, I didn't advance. And the nicer version of the phone call is that she was like, why don't you try to, call around and come up with a plan, and just you gotta figure out a plan that's going to get you from what this is. Because, the do it your own, the DIY version is not working. And that day I called Noah Reitman, who now is the bass circle. I knew him from Michigan. Noah Reitman's now assistant principal or associate principal in Vancouver Symphony. But at the time he was like me, we were just, circuit auditioning. And I said, Noah, I don't know what's wrong. He's like, why don't you just come over and play for me? I'm staying at my aunt's apartment. I go over to his place. I play for him. And he's like, Isaac, you're too good to make these kind of mistakes. I'm like, what was that about? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I just the bass is fighting me, or this is a terrible bow. And he's like, you need to talk to Leigh Mesh. And I was like, who? I'd never heard of Leigh Mesh. And he's like, he's in the Met. And I'm like, oh, right. The Met. Yeah, the Met has an orchestra. So those are probably good people. Yeah. I mean, I knew nothing. And he goes, yeah, Brendan Kane studied with him. Brendan has a job. I studied with him, and this would be great for you. And I called or emailed Leigh like a week later and just said, hi, I'm sort of drowning here, but Noah told me you know your stuff. And he was like, yeah, sure, great. Why don't you come up? And I go up and I played with him. And over the course of the next 3 years before 2015. So it still took time. I was taking auditions. I was not advancing. I was sometimes advancing, but he had what I needed when I needed it. And like that, the approach, everything. And he was tough. I mean, Levinson has a reputation as a tough, I'm a tough teacher. I never thought that. He just was a sweet guy, maybe early in his career, he was, harder to work with. Maybe I have a high tolerance, but Leigh Mesh really, and just through niceness, he would sit with you and go, wow, you really don't hear it. Or he would go, yeah, you're doing it the same way again. Like, do this instead. And just sat through so many long hours. I'd pay for an hour lesson with him and we'd be there 2.5 hours. But he was that kind of just generous spirit. And I can't thank him enough for that transitional period when I was like at my lowest, to help build me up. And then the critical moment was when the Met did their audition. That was Rex Serrani and Brendan Kane both won their spots that year. So this was 2014 or maybe 2015, but pretty close before Detroit. And I made the semifinals then. Kevin Brown was there. That was neat to get to meet a lot of the people who now have these jobs, and you're just in that company for once and you're like, oh yeah, I know all of you. You're all good people, Hey, I'm here too. Okay. And so I called him because Met's all blind, like 100% blind. And he thought I was calling it. And he was like, hey, look, don't worry about it. There are more auditions. And I was like, no, Leigh, I advanced. I'm playing another audition in 2 weeks is when the next round is. He was like, oh my gosh. It's like, oh, wow, that's great. Sounds surprised. But like from that moment, then I thought, okay, this is working. This path makes sense. This guy knows what he's talking about. He's done this to other people. He's shepherded them along this path. And maybe it was some combination of that and then going back and believing in a lot of the musical ideas I had, but now being able to couple that with the technique and figuring out that balance between the two, that made such a difference. And from then it was, I won Detroit and then I went and won New York the next year.
But I think it's super inspiring to hear about those years where you didn't and you were grinding. And I think it's so good. Like that's about the same amount of years that I was on the audition scene. And I remember my last audition was Kansas City. And I was driving home from a gig in Memphis. And I was thinking like, I don't want to take this audition, but I wanted my $50 back, from the deposit. So I thought but I was like, I'm literally driving by Kansas City. It's just like I get off the interstate and I go play and I get my $50 and I played. I just like total garbage first round. And then I went home and I'm just like, I think I started looking for other options at that point, but it's cool to find. It's amazing. Hey, go shout out to Leigh Mesh. Leigh's awesome. That's it's incredible. You find the right person at the right time. And that's That's cool. It's cool to see people directly from Curtis right into Philly too. But I mean, I think it's more relatable probably, the path that you went on.
And I sort of think, I mean, that's kind of a segue into educational things, but I think about all of I have so many not obstacles in my life, as tall white male in the bass world. Like I'm a prototype. And I see that all around me. And so, I had plenty of obstacles, I didn't have the super expensive instrument. I didn't have the fancy, lessons and things growing up or access to all these people that some people do. And, for some people, maybe that shortens their path. It certainly plays a role. But I think with all of here we see it on the news all the time. They're really showing, the Asian violence in the US, it's on the rise. And they're like, look how crazy this is. Well, that's crazy. Back to our regular, Korean news going on locally. And all of we're working with all of, we call it DEI, is the sanitized term for, stamping out white racism in the workplace. But all of the extra difficulties that African-American and Black, Brown, Asian students are experiencing and experience throughout their careers at the expense of a very white male, institutional system. I've tried to think more since being here and in the last few months about all the little ways that then I have been participating in that kind of, not the overt stuff. I'm not going to watch, some musician come on stage and be like, oh, I don't like the color of their skin, so they're out. I don't think that's happening overtly anymore, but certainly the undertones of all of that. It's the white guy who's tall comes out and I go, he reminds me of me at my age, and I'm in a little more positive mood. Or someone comes out and I go, I don't know, how's that person going to sound? Is this going to be a small sound? Is this going to be, there's sexism, there's all kinds of things packaged into that. And I hope, through this, with all this like extra attention on it, that we can all think about the real subtle ways that we all participate in the sort of self-perpetuation of what makes it easy for certain people to do well. And I think in terms of education, that's what motivates me and motivated me to do all the kind of things and the free music and whatever publishing stuff that I do, is just to try to find ways to actively fight against whatever obstacles I can easily remove for somebody else who's trying to, do the same path.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico. And one of the things that attracted me so much to this app is the beautiful user interface. Here's Daniel Spreadbury, Senior Product Manager, on how they thought about designing this user interface.
It was building on that idea of having everything in its place and a place for everything, basically, and not just throwing everything at the screen and hoping that you'd be able to find your way through it.
I have become a true fan of Dorico. I have the full version. I use it every single day. I use it in my lessons. I use it for... I have become such a fan of Dorico. I use it every single day. I use it in my lessons. I use it for making arrangements and exercises and everything like that. There is a free version, SE, Dorico SE, and you can do everything practically that the full version of the software lets you do. So if you're doing arrangements for a student, duets, or anything like that, or exercises, that is perfect for you. Dorico.com will take you to their page on Steinberg's website, and I can't say enough good things about them. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make an incredible mic for upright bass called the Nadine, and 6-time Grammy-winning jazz bassist and former Contrabass Conversations guest, Christian McBride, is a big fan. Christian says, as an acoustic bassist, it's very important for me to have this instrument amplified as naturally as possible. What I love about this microphone is that it makes the instrument sound exactly how I hear it in my head. Honestly, I don't know if you can get a better review than that. The Nadine is an instrument-mounted condenser mic with an incredibly clear, natural sound and great feedback rejection. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt with mic purchase from their website. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and learn more about Nadine. Well, and access to public domain sheet music is like a path that is solvable. So I think that's like a really cool one. Some things are harder, like the instrument, right? Or those unconscious biases that you're talking about. Like, yeah, and it's really... it's tricky. I remember having a conversation with Ira Gold. Well, many people, but Ira Gold comes to mind maybe 4 years ago about, just like you look at, if we just think about just females in the bass world, just there, we could talk about any, but like if you look at the K through 12 age bass playing population here in the United States. We'll just talk about the United States here. It's not 50-50 in terms of male and female, but it's relatively close to that. It's not 50-50, but let's say, I don't know what it is, 30-70 or something like that. But then you get to music school and that number drops precipitously. Well, Ira kind of spearheaded this conversation back, I think, at the 2017 ISB convention or something like that. Like, why is that? And I mean, there are a lot of reasons. Part of it is, and it's similar to the tech culture here in San Francisco. Like when it's the locker room culture, I was talking to these three young women in the UK about it. They call it lad culture over in the UK, you know, that locker room sort of thing. That's just, it's a tough environment, you know, like when you, and you're, and there are just so many factors that play in, but that are more challenging to solve probably, but one that is, I think, significantly easier is IMSLP. Like, when the heck did you get involved with that? I remember when that appeared, it was like, where has this been my whole life? I think I was teaching high school orchestra at the time, and I'm like, what? I can get Mozart quartets for my gig quartet, like right here? Where has this been? So how did that pop on your radar?
Artsy segue. I remember I was looking for some sort of sheet music, and I'm the Napster generation. So we got internet and a computer. I mean, we were late. My house, this is not a tech childhood story. But I think sometime around my junior year, you know, we had an old computer. So, I mean, we're talking like prehistoric. You could not put internet on it. But we got a new enough computer, maybe my junior year. So this is right around 2000. And I took for granted that, you can just go and download things. There's music, you want to hear a song, you just download it. Okay, you delete it, it's a stupid song. And that this was file sharing, all of this. This was just how we accessed. I mean, where was I going to go to get music? My public library is going to have, like, I want to hear all this stuff. I can't physically, I'm going to go buy CDs. Who has money to buy 3 million? This was also during the like price fixing, you know, CD times where they had that class action lawsuit later. So, you know, it just made sense to a high schooler that, okay, this is how you access stuff. So with that framework, I then was looking for something, or I thought, this is such an old piece. It must be like this excerpt or something must be put online by someone somewhere. Something really standard. Maybe it's like Otello solo or something that I like heard of and was like, let me look for this. And I couldn't find anything anywhere. And then I saw that there were some of these websites trying to do digitization of, and like, you know, you could type it up yourself, but then you still needed the music. And there was like an Utopia project, and then MLPS, who knows, what is this? Okay. And they had a handful of things at the time. I mean, I've already fast forwarded. So when I was doing this search, it was like 2006, maybe 7. And so they started their website real short after that. And by they, I mean, this is like Edward Guo, who's a Canadian, and like maybe he had a couple friends. It's just, and it still isn't. It's, people think these things are enormous operations. It's still like 5 people. I think he actually hired some of the people who were volunteers, because now that they do ad supported and subscription, optional subscription based, they have a revenue stream to pay for, you know, server and bandwidth. But I just saw that and was like, oh my gosh, this is great. We'll just put all of our pirated music here and we'll beat the system and, you know, take down all the everything. And so then I'm like reading about it and I'm like, oh no, you can't, it's got to all be legal stuff. Well, that's like nothing. I mean, what music is, there's no legal sheet music. How would that be possible? They all say copyright 2000 on the bottom of every page. So then reading and just kind of getting fascinated about like, okay, can we put this up? Could we put that up? And then, you know, in the forums, I would say, no, that's not, so here are the rules. And what really got me in it was just that slow process of being curious. And then let me look at this little thing and let me read your frequently asked questions page. Okay, it's really long-winded and a mess. Maybe I could help with that because it's a wiki style site. So anyone can edit anything. And I thought, I'm pretty good with copy editing, I think, you know, as a musician. I think being a musician in that subgroup of copy editors, I think I'm pretty good at that. So I went through and, you know, edited all kinds of stuff, cut stuff way down, like, oh, this is so bad and rambling and blah, blah, blah. And then they said, hey, that was pretty great. Like some of the people on the message boards were like, that was really helpful. You know, you should do some more of that. I was like, okay. And then I noticed we had a problem where there was lots of stuff we knew was out there, but we didn't have a way of figuring out what we already had up and what was already, you know, located. And I thought there's got to be some way I can help with this aspect. And I got really fixated on, is there some programmy way to figure out, you know, what's missing, what's not missing? And the Sibley Library, I mean, this is like one of the greatest contributions to digital music of all time, was when the Sibley Library at Eastman School of Music did this giant, I think they got some grant money or a lot of grant money for it. They digitized everything in their library and made it all available. So Google did this with the University of Michigan, and then they put big like Google watermark over things. And I don't think they digitized sheet music. So that was back in 2000 something. So that was a missed opportunity. But Eastman digitized everything that they owned. Even if it wasn't available, it was stamped like this will be available in 2056, so that we had a system and a way to track it. So I had done like a little bit of programming, just kind of curiously since like high school. I just thought it was neat. I read a little bit about it. So I just got way in the weeds with like Python and some programming language stuff and thought, let's figure this out. And I wrote a little program that would check the entire list of what Eastman's digital library had numerically, and then cross-reference that with what we had uploaded, cross-loaded from them. And that would at least tell us what they had done that we didn't have, as long as we had like a numbering system from that point forward. Like we would use their numbers on our site. So there's a little bit of legwork to sort of implement a system, but once you did that, you could always automatically check, okay, these are new and we haven't done these yet, instead of just, guessing or going by composer. And that was, boy, you should like edit most of that out. This is like an overly deep.
This is interesting. No, get out of here. How many people have used that on an almost daily basis? I mean, me included.
Well, so that was just, but that wasn't me doing any, I guess parallel to this is here I felt emboldened to do all of that, right? Like I'm going to write a system and I'm going to get involved with this site and I like redesigned the entire look. If you go now, that's like a thing I designed that. It's not great. It was, designed by committee, but I got really involved in those ways. And I was so afraid, though, or intimidated to actually contribute anything as a musician. I don't know where maybe it's just insecurity, but where that comes from, where, maybe a lot of us are more inclined to take risks and things we don't know anything about, and jump in and, okay, it failed. I'm going to try to bake bread. Oh, I didn't do a good job, whatever. But at things that we're kind of trained at, there's all this hesitancy and I don't know, okay, I'll do this, but, only a little. So I didn't actually typeset anything and put it on the website until like 2014 or something. I mean, that's 7 years of doing a lot of this was when I was not working full time. So I had free time to sort of, do my volunteerism. And I'm doing all of this editing and, background work, but too afraid to do anything like that. Just thinking it will be dumb. It won't be good. It won't look right. People won't like it. Who wants to use some free edition? I'm not a real person. And so only out of desperation that we were doing Rossini Duo at a festival I was at, and the page turns were so bad. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. Like we're having to physically cut out and tape, things to do this. I'm just going to do it. And so then I got in and I typed that whole thing out and put it up. And I just checked the other day, it's been used by like 20,000 some people. And
it's crazy. Think about that.
I would never have thought that, one, it would have that kind of a reach, but two, that anybody would download it. Like, why would they think me putting that up there is of any, I'm just a random freelancer, who's going to trust? But people just needed it. They needed it. They trusted that it was right. They used it. They're lucky that I was careful and I did a good job with it. You don't want to distribute, bad stuff, but I'm pretty OCD about taking the time to make sure things look right. And, that matters. But it's that initial hump of being too afraid to believe in yourself that you can do these things, that these are for you to do, that they aren't just for, some larger institutional organization to assign to you or hire you for. And once I got through that, then that sort of broke a mental barrier. And I was like, okay, we waited 100 some years. These works have been in the public domain for forever. No one is doing this. I'm just going to start doing this. And I mean, to be fair, there are other people doing it, but for certain bass works, nobody was doing those particular things.
Well, it's become what you see when a student comes in with that's what I see is the IMSLP. If whatever it's the from excerpts to anything. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. Well, not pretty remarkable. It's remarkable. What a resource that is. I mean, I even just think in my own life, back when I was conducting, how often I'd be doing a youth orchestra and they'd be doing I don't know, some Haydn symphony, and like get the score. I'd look through. I have I don't know how many gigabytes of material or hundreds of megabytes at the very least of material from IMSLP. I mean, I remember talking to the music director for the Chicago Youth Symphony, where like going through all these scores, and he's just like, this is like the greatest thing of all time. He was like an early adopter of the big iPad, and he would have these things like, look at this, you can zoom in, you can look at all the, it's just yeah, it's remarkable. And then that whole access thing, right? I was just a couple hours ago, I was on the doing a call with a bassist from the Yucatan Peninsula, who was doing a Spanish translation of Tom Johnson's Failing, and just talking to him about, he's like, we don't have any method books in Spanish. He's like, the method books aren't in Spanish. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, maybe the Rabath Book 1 has some Spanish translation, or maybe that one has been, but he is like, so one of his projects is trying to do Spanish translations, because, people in Latin America or Spanish speaking countries, in general, they're learning the notes, but the context around it is not there. And especially a lot of Mexico people don't necessarily speak English as a second language. And it's just, so it's really, you talk to somebody like that and you realize the impact that what you've done and people on that are doing. It's incredible.
Well, and that's what's really motivating, is to just hear about other people. And I mean, I would imagine he's going to make an edition, and, he'll sell his edition. That's great. And that's good, just to make it any amount of availability is good. But to hear, that these are needs, and then thinking about how people can fill those. I didn't mean
no, not at all. That's a tricky topic too. And I would not be surprised if he wants that to be freely available and not for sale. But then that gets into the whole thing of like musicians, and you got the beauty of access. And as somebody who like pumps out a lot of freely available content, that I go in the stats, I'm like, wow, that Alex Hanna interview's been listened to, I don't know, whatever large amount of times. It's like great. But like, but then of course, then you have people also sell their wares, as a part of their portfolio. And so it's a tricky thing. But it's so interesting, like if we think about beyond sheet music, like instruction, I was struck and the amount of content, maybe not as organized as something like an online course, but the amount of content that a platform like YouTube has, the amount that one can learn. I mean, it's incredible. That's like the de facto learning resource for a lot of people without, or even with a primary instructor. So curation becomes the challenge then, when we're talking about that. These are huge topics that I don't have the answers to for sure. But like, where do you see things going, or what do you wish was out there, just in terms of like, because like somebody sitting without access to a private teacher, which is a lot of people. Maybe they got an okay instrument they could upgrade later. They've got resources. You can get a lot of repertoire on IMSLP freely as a bass player. You can go real far with that. But the instruction thing is a little bit more of a challenge. The instrument thing is certainly a challenge, maybe the most formidable challenge. But I don't know. Big questions, Isaac.
Right. So this is always the tension between, putting access and getting things to people, and, do the freemium model, or do the, pay what you want model. I thought that was great what Stephen Street I saw when he did on his Bottesini edition, for at least that limited time, he was like, hey, it's a pay what you want. So if you're really excited, get in here. And then after that, it's, pay a person for their work. And that's always I listened to his podcast that you had, and I really thought about, this is the tension between, freelancers need to be able to earn a living, right? And if your work is like, I play the bass, but not full time, and I make a living by, doing editions or doing this sort of thing, do I really want to be the full-time bass player with a salary who comes in and undercuts all of that? So I'm sensitive to that situation. And I think the pragmatic compromise to that is to value both things for what they are. So like when Tobias Gluckler puts out this like amazing academic researched piece, for this Henley edition, and it's like years and years of amazing research, that's phenomenal. And people who really want that level of precision in their thing, I'm sure would happily pay for it. A random student person can go on IMSLP, and I'll put up a version, that I've done, and I would stand behind my level of research. I'm not a Tobias Gluckler, but I'm doing pretty good, careful work, and they can have that level of what they want, for free. And so, this also can drive more what Xavier Foley is doing with all the pieces he's writing, and sometimes he releases something for free and sometimes it's paid. And you want to support that, that's a phenomenal, important thing to do. And as people with salaries or with money, we should absolutely do that sort of thing. I want to try to tackle the side that isn't very monetizable, like who really is gonna, who's gonna take the time to redo I know there was that Eccles, as soon as I say Eccles Sonata, somebody just did Eccles Sonata in an Urtext, edition again, which great, but you could, and I need to do this. I was in the process and I start too many projects and I don't, it's like too many tabs. I don't close all the tabs, but I started a Eccles just write out and just do the Zimmerman version, but without the fingerings. And that's not copyright. And then people can just have that. And in some parts of the world, Zimmerman editions are already, like China, Canada, any country that does life plus 50-year copyright, that's already public domain. So even his fingerings and editorial markings, those all would be totally free. But put out a version.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And do that I'm thinking about just doing that for the core canon of stuff that isn't already there. And the void, I think, that we most could use other similar-minded people contributing to are things like orchestra tuning, piano parts, solo tuning piano parts for, the major concertos we all do. I could not find Bach suites other than in the original pitch, but like the G major transcriptions for the third suite that we all do, that every student learns, like the minuets or the bourrées, or, that sort of stuff. I can't find that in like a free version. I thought for sure that was already done by just somebody. Just put it, he doesn't do dynamics, there's no slurs, just put in the notes. Why did nobody do that?
That's true. I have looked for that myself, and I've come up short. I mean, I don't know how many bass editions at my place, so it's all good. But still, just like I get a lot of emails from people from all over the world. Hey, do you know about this piece or that piece? And I just never send random people scans of my copyrighted stuff. That's not like a good policy. But I point to them on IMSLP, and I've come up short in terms of that. Yeah, that would be a great. Well, hey, if somebody is listening to this and wants to get involved, I would usually save this for the end, but we got more to cover, I'm sure too. But what's do they just go on IMSLP? Let some bass player listening here that's got some Sibelius or Finale or whatever chops and wants to get involved.
Right, you've hit. This is the $1 million. And what I should have done was start something and then been like, yes, you can go on to bass Urtext savethemusicproject.org.
Well, we could set that up and it could just redirect to email you if you want.
I think that really, by bringing that up, you hit on the real problem that this sort of a project draws. And that's that because none of this is monetized work, how do you promote it? There's no money to promote it. So unless you use your own money to promote it, you're going to get outshined and outnoticed by, try to Google some of these sheet music things. I mean, IMSLP comes up now, but you get freesheetmusic.com and blah blah, and you're like, okay, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Who are you outfits? But even the overlap that Stephen Street with the Concerto di Bravura, I was like, I just did that myself. Do we both just spend time? And he wants to put out an edition as part of his project. Great. I'm like, you should have. If I had known this, I wouldn't have wasted my time on. I would do a different one. There's so much music to do. So how do we not step on each other's toes? That's there isn't a centralized, place. And you can go on IMSLP and, share these things like in a forum, but that's really the organizing of this around something is really what it takes. I mean, if people want to just do it, I'll give you an email for me and you can put that down. And if someone really feels moved to do this kind of work, I would love to hear from them. And I'm happy to provide all the help and assistance I can. Perfect example. Well, I won't I don't know if he wants me to talk about him on the podcast, but there's a guy who is a bass player who just randomly called me up, emailed me out of the blue saying, hey, I wanted to talk about your Bottesini edition. And I was like, that's a very short email. Okay. And so then I was like, I'll bite. So I replied and I was like, I'm not sure what you mean, but yeah, sure. And he goes, oh, no, you were doing high solo tuning. I was like, I've been thinking about all these pieces that would be good in high solo tuning an extra half step higher to make these keys work out for these transcriptions. I didn't think anybody else was doing this. And I was like, oh no, I think a lot of people are. I mean, Bottesini did that. Lots of people are looking at that. And he goes, oh, well, if I send you some of these PDFs that I've been typing up, would you take a look at them? And I was like, sure. And so I proofed them, and I noted where he had stuff he'd missed or typos or things. And just from him seeing me do that on IMSLP, he decided to go and do those things. And now he is doing, his own editions. He put up a Elegy and Tarantella version with the piano part for that high solo tuning. And, he's working on other arrangements and transcriptions. So some of it is just, go do it. And then some of it is, if you're not confident and you're not sure about it, show the part to people who know how to read sheet music well, and they can just look. And either of us, if we see a piece of sheet music, we can immediately tell, okay, this looks like a terribly formatted score, or yeah, this looks like what I'm used to looking at,
Yeah, there needs to be some sort of like shared Trello board or something of like what ideas for things that people are working on, so that you don't have like massive projects that you're duplicating unwittingly with someone, especially if you're all trying to like work for the common good. It's so tricky whether it's Steven's piece or whatever. The whole like I think the pay what you will model for the journeyman or journey person kind of people who are like doing some freelancing, trying to get maybe monetize some of their efforts with sheet music. I think that's a beautiful thing. This whole sheet music thing that we've been doing is working well. Definitely not my idea. It's my business partner Trevor came up with. We had actually Michael Kurth from the Atlanta Symphony about 4 years ago said, "Hey, can we start a repository of all this stuff that I'm like having, I'm not selling?" And we started, and then sort of had the idea like, oh well, what if we do this and pay and basically just market it through our email list and social media and send it back to the composer. And it's been and pay the composer, and it's worked better than I thought, but it's been interesting. The pay what you will options have worked remarkably well and have paid the composer very well. And I really like that, the fairness of that kind of a model. A podcast that I pay for annually, Sam Harris's Waking, is it still called Waking Up? Anyway, his podcast, he has a model where it's like whatever a year, but if you can't afford it, you just email Sam and he will give you a year subscription free, and he'll do that for forever. And some sort of model like that, like, look, I don't have the $25 for this edition or the $5 or whatever, but that's not to say the beauty of having this central repository of bass music that everybody can have access to without sending random emails to people. That's a beautiful thing. But yeah, it would be great to there are definitely people out there that want to contribute and have, but it's just trying to get all that organized, that I'm sure is the challenge.
I think there aren't enough people doing it now, that the risk of that was me and Steven doing the same piece in time, 120 years after. Those are the first edition, like those garbage 1950 editions that he was talking about. So many typos. Just embarrassing typesetting for that. I don't know who did it or who thought that was okay. They just changed stuff. They thought, oh, Bottesini made a mistake here. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's got too many ledger lines or something. And they would just change things. And that, when we pass that down, and how many things get done that way. So, that aside, there's so few people doing this. I think people should first just get out there, see what's missing. And if you want to do one, do a small something, put it up. But otherwise, please have people feel free to contact me. And just, I want to think about this. Great. I will tell you, I will be of whatever help I can to help promote this sort of thing for people who want to do that sort of thing.
After several years of planning, I'm so happy that my course, Beginner's Classical Bass, is out on Discover Double Bass. This course is made up of 66. Yes, that's a lot. Video lessons which cover a wide range of topics on classical double bass, starting from taking your bass out of the case, which is very fun to film, and Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and I have a great blooper reel about that, and leading to different bow strokes such as staccato and portato. The topics also include posture, simple scales and arpeggios, left-hand technique, bowing technique, simple pieces which are fun to play, practice tips, and much more. You can learn more through the link in the show notes or just visit discoverdouble-bass.com/Jason Heath. I am always looking for ways to better my practice, and Mark Gelfer from Modacity has some great quick tips on how to level up with your practicing.
So emotional regulation is one that we need to look at, because that can give you, like, for example, for special forces pistol shooting, showed 30% improvement once they were taught emotional regulation. That's the ability to identify your emotions and work with your emotions to return to balance. So if you have a moment of frustration, bang it out on your instrument, blow it out on your instrument, or pluck it out on the most evil, frustrated pizzicato that you can, and get yourself back to a place where you're center. Venting is actually a real and research validated strategy for emotional regulation. But when you use words, you tend to reconfirm or recycle a negative story. So instead, vent through your instrument whenever you're feeling frustrated or disappointed, get back to center and keep on going. It gives you a little bit of variation anyway.
You can learn more about my favorite practice app and get a special deal on lifetime membership by visiting modacity.co/CBC. And thank you, Modacity, for sponsoring the podcast. Beautiful. We could figure out. I can have him email me, and I could send him along to you if you don't want to get hit up by. You probably won't get hit up by hundreds of people, but yeah, but maybe you will. Who knows? Well, so how about the access to instruction thing? That's a tricky one too, right? And as someone who's done a few online courses at this point, that one of which is in an FBI vault, which is hilarious. No joke.
Right. That was, you talked about it in another thing. Yeah. That you had that run-in or something. You were involved with the UK stuff.
I was involved with a Ponzi scheme, very inadvertently. It's one of those things that I would love to put on a video. Yeah, I know. I would love to put in a video. The FBI sees my bass course. Here's why. But it's the sort of thing I talk about in long form content because I think it's so entertaining. But I was working with this company one of the other companies that this person owned got busted for a Ponzi scheme, defrauding investors of I think $250 million. And it's very anyway. Long story short, I shot a bass course that the FBI ran in and seized everything, including that. So I've only seen one bizarre little clip from it. But and then I have one and now another that's coming out. But I've, that's the amount of comments I've gotten from the stuff I've put out on YouTube over the years. Like I recorded all the George Vance pieces maybe 4 years ago. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was trying to find a video to show a student of mine, and those have been viewed. I mean, they haven't been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, but they've been viewed a surprising amount. And I get comments to this day like, "Thank you so much for this," And so I don't know that whole but that's not really instruction. That's like a play along. But that whole access, whether it's to a teacher you're interacting with one-on-one, or some sort of pre-recorded, step-by-step thing, or someone like Dennis Whitaker, who's just like an incredible educator and he'll teach you all about the bass, through his incredibly useful exercises. I don't know. Have you thought much about access in terms of the instructions?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the other side of the coin, right? Like this is my own hang up too with I still have not had the confidence to put fingerings or bowings in any of the editions I've made. Again, this, even where I am now, I still think I'm not an authority, I'm not Zimmerman. Only Zimmerman can put fingerings and bowings in edition. But that question of how do we get students who don't have access to the level of education that they would need, any amount of good education. And I think it's really brave and great that you play and put these things up, because I think so many people I talk to are just too afraid that if they record themselves doing anything and put it up on YouTube, that they'll get judged for it, that people will think, oh, that's how good you are. Well, that you shouldn't be playing in that, orchestra, or no, I heard something out of tune. So that, comments.
I get that fear too. I burned that bridge long ago. So for me, but I fully understand that issue for people. It makes sense.
If we can think then of there will be two things needed, right? There will be demonstrate this video, here's how I think this excerpt should sound and I can play it. That's one, contribution. But just talking through the excerpt, I mean, in exactly the kind of way that I saw, Hal Robinson has that quad book where here's the excerpt and here are thoughts and intelligent information about it. But there's so many people who have, an amazing skill set and a full-time job and a salary. So then, maybe just think about taking a little time to put out, it can be self-promotion, it can be for whatever motivation, but, put yourself out there doing just a couple talks through a couple excerpts, here's me playing. You don't even have to play Mozart 40, play a recording of it and then talk about what you think should be thought about in it, or play a scale and talk about how a scale, don't make it so for such an advanced level, play something really basic from a a really common, play the first few Simandl things and talk about what, a student should think about. Because once you do that, then Google now has the auto translate. And you can put, if you put subtitles, then they can auto translate that. And you reach such an audience. And with like the fetish of view counts and, oh, this got 10,000 views. I mean, if your video has 50 views, that's like 50 bass players who watched it. And it's probably like 30 robots, but some number of bass players watched that who really needed it. And if it's all about chasing, the high number of viewers, and I think a lot of people starting out in this sort of thing, whether like you want to make an edition or you want to make a YouTube channel, there's this, how do I monetize? How do I get to be a big person? And it stops being about content. I'm thinking about all the YouTube celebrity people who start off doing content about, the topic, and now it's not really that anymore. It's like a self-referential, they get away from actual music or whatever their thing was they were doing. So understanding that it may not seem like you're getting this huge return for it, but you're really, really impacting a lot of people. I mean, when I look at some little edition I did and it has like, 30 downloads, I'm like, wow, that's great. That's 30 people who probably, I mean, some of them were just curious, but maybe there's a few in there who were like, I had no hope of finding this. I can't believe you put this up. I can't order, this UK edition in Paraguay. So, there's no international shipping that way, that kind of thing. And that's an easy expansion of what's already there. I've learned so much about excerpts in my early days from YouTube videos, for better or for worse. I mean, this was early YouTube, so there just wasn't that much, but there were people who were like, there's me recording my list, and they put it up. So if we can have like the 2.0 version of that, and what you did with all the Vance stuff, the more people that think about doing that kind of stuff. And maybe that's for people who aren't comfortable typesetting. That's an easy way to make a contribution. You don't have to be an amazing bass player to do that either. You could be a student of any level who just makes it relatable to somebody at your level. A high school kid could say, here's how I'm working on this. My teacher said I should try this, and that will be of use to, another kid somewhere.
Yeah, it's incredible to like I was chatting with a colleague, former roommate of mine who teaches out in New York, I think Queensborough College. And this, we were talking like 2012 about this or something, but he's like just talking about, oh yeah, then I played this YouTube video and this YouTube video. And he's like, my job, I am the curator of YouTube. That is my job. And this guy, but I think that's the next like it has been really interesting for me during the pandemic to see people hop on because they've just got all this time. Like Joe Conyers is on. I was like, hey, Joe's a YouTuber and he's doing all this cool stuff. Dennis Whitaker, I keep bringing him up, but boy, if the amount of knowledge he's transmitting through like lessons from Paul Ellison or other people like that, and the way he's doing it, I mean, don't take a lesson with me anyway, but don't take a lesson with me. Go watch Dennis's like 40 hours or whatever he's got of like really in depth with graphics and visuals and close-ups of his hands. And then like I look forward to I don't think I have time to do this right now, but somebody will to like curate that content down to like, okay, let's make a path through with these different people and sort of vet and like, oh yeah, here, if you want to learn about scales, here are all these different ways. And it's incredible. And those low number counts, or they're not low number counts, but those number counts like in the double digits. I mean, the thing I say is like, okay, let's say you get 30 people checking out your video or downloading something. Well, put 30 people in a studio class. You'd be so happy to have 30 people in a studio class or a classroom. That'd be like a full room. And so like our perception of those metrics gets so skewed when and then there's the keeping up with the Joneses sort of thing, and then you're watching some famous YouTuber and they're like, okay, they're good. But it's I just sorry, I'm a little all over the place here, but since you've looked at numbers like that before, do you have any guesstimate as to how many double basses there are out there in the world right now? I've thought about this a little bit. Do you have any? If you were going to like try to guess, like enthusiasts, people that kind of play the bass in some capacity, have you? Do you have any number?
I mean, when I saw the number of downloads on some of those editions, I thought, well, that's a much bigger number than I thought were bass players in the world. So I don't know. Like if something hits 20,000, or for some of the pieces that have been around longer, and that just by like the famous editions that have been on IMSLP for 10 years, I don't know, in like the 100?
We got to have at least 20. Yeah, I mean, they've got to have at least 20,000 because I guarantee you not all bass players have downloaded editions.
Are there 100,000?
So,
not in the hundreds, but I mean like 100,000. So maybe between 20,000 and 100. I don't know if we got like a, based on per capita and then extrapolated out to countries that, have bass as an instrument people learn. A big number.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate. I think probably 100,000 is probably maybe the top end of it, but I'm not sure. I've had conversations about this with Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass. It's like, okay, well, and if we just look at some metrics, well, he's got 42,000 subscribers. Okay, people subscribing to a channel called Discover Double Bass, they could very well not be bass players, but there's a high percentage that they are. So let's just at least, I've had my maximum podcast, I've had into the 50,000 maybe for like Ed Barker from 15 years ago or something, or maybe somewhere around there, like some astonishing, scarily large amount for like Jason back in 2007 trying to talk to Ed Barker. Ed Barker was great. I probably wasn't. And then, I put out these they're not goofy, they're good, but they're very dated videos with Andy Anderson from the Lyric Opera of Chicago. It's me with my 2 megapixel Canon Pixma, like you can hear all this. But the first one of those, 280,000 views, 300,000. Now they're not all bass players. It's probably a lot of people curious about the bass, but hey, have we got 300,000 bass curious people in the world? So I think about those numbers sometimes, and just the impact that something that is publicly available, like what you're doing, or me or Jeff or whoever, that has the potential.
Yeah. And I think what you're hitting on is the next hurdle maybe is to try to get some more music relevant to the largest number of bass players, which is the ability level, that beginner to beginner intermediate level of bass player. And that's where most students are, and most students quit. So getting things for them that are enjoyable, accessible, well done. Like advanced books are great if you can get access to the George Vance method, right?
You can buy them.
That's good for that group of people, but there are large areas where that's not, and I don't know what they're working on. What method are they working on? Maybe old Simandl books and photocopies. So in the back of my mind, I've always been thinking about doing like a revised Simandl, where you just, because that's all public domain, just take that material, get rid of like second and a half position, I don't need to get to that right away. I still can't play well in what is it, third position? We all have the ones that we're like, don't ask me to do that, and just reposition that material, put it in, if it's in a digital format, you've got text, then anyone can copy paste that and translate that with Google Translate to a different language, or someone could hand do it, or for people who don't have internet, it could be printed out and distributed to those people, by other people at their schools, or, however it's being disseminated. But just in a way that feels more, there's a reason young kids' educational material is packaged and designed the way it is, that has like a sort of relatable visual to students. And I'm sure there's a lot of research and design and thought behind that approach, as opposed to the really dated look of a Simandl book. And there would be a very easy way to do that, and kind of retype it in, put in a person's own thoughts and reflections, and make it an updated content. And then do with that what you please. And maybe someone will hear me say this, and they'll steal the idea and do it. And great, thank you. These are not proprietary ideas I'm having. So that's the nice thing about not having a financial stake in any of this stuff, is that I'm not worried about anybody. I'm all about, let's collaborate on these things. I don't want to keep my ideas secret. I want other people to go and run with them. So I'm not the only person, doing it.
Yeah, engaging beginner content that's like it takes, because I'll tell you that the day that the year probably that I started using those progressive repertoire materials, I started noticing improvements just because the way that was approached. But I'm so sick of trying to get people to buy these Carl Fisher books, with like a that I don't even believe they're available in PDF form. And so I've been frustrated by that just in my, I guess I don't really teach that much these days, but it would be nice to have materials like that go. We don't have to copy that, but that's just a way of approaching the bass, or however you want to approach it, but just clean, engaging material for beginners. It's incredible, and as I connect with more people around the world, just to realize how many people there are in different parts of the world that are thirsty for this kind of thing on the bass. Like even my conversation with my friend in the Yucatan Peninsula today, it's let's just try to get this stuff translated, or have text Google translatable, or something like that. It's it'll be exciting to see where we go with all this. I get so happy when I see any new bass player hop on and start doing some new videos. There's this bass player named Jonathan Borden who's in the Buffalo Philharmonic, who started a YouTube channel, and it's like awesome. He's like it's all about right hand French bow technique so far. It's the most specific content, but he's got like this montage of him like pumping iron with his bow. It's like super, super goofy, but also very good material. And I see that. I see what Dennis is doing, what Joe's doing, what if any video, Hal only has a couple videos out, but they're solid gold. It'll be. I hope to see more and more of that, because I mean, just it's incredible. That grainy Hal Robinson VHS copy from like the late 80s or whenever that was, the amount of people that have learned from that. You can't even like see Hal. He's like this ghost. But it's it'll be fun to keep an eye out.
Yeah, there's a lot of avenue for people to make real meaningful contributions to just the general, pedagogical based world. And also at the same time, make a name for themselves. Like if you are thinking about being a professor of bass someday, an easy way to distinguish yourself from all the other applicants would be to be able to say, check out this YouTube channel with all this amazing content. This is my approach. This is how I teach. People like it. I mean, look at what Joe Conyers is doing with his whole series. Those look amazing. I enjoy watching them. I find them very, even as a professional, I find it extremely, informative and relevant to the stuff I'm doing. And he could very well have done that before he had a full-time job. He could have done that before teaching at Juilliard. That could have maybe been used as a way to help him make a case for getting those things. So maybe even in a selfish way, people can start thinking about ways that through advocacy and doing things that benefit other people through like a YouTube model, it's also beneficial for yourself. And it's also, making a meaningful impact on what's around you. That still for me is that's the hardest, self-doubt and a thing to shatter is it okay for me to impart my thoughts to the next generation? And because I've had such great teachers, I have such a hesitancy to think that my ideas or thoughts are valid. And maybe the best antidote to that is just to start, like it was with the transcribing, is just to start doing things like that. And maybe other, people listening, just try doing some of that and, get over yourself, and people will decide if it's valuable or not, but better to have something out there than to not have anything out there for the next 100 years.
Yeah, well, I think to hear someone in the New York Philharmonic express that concern is incredibly helpful, just to know, just kind of like your path, because it's so easy to look at the resume or the page or whatever and just imagine this neat and because everything looks neat and tidy in retrospect. Like, oh, I did this and this, but in the moment, total chaos. You're like working on IMSLP at night. You're like not advancing or randomly advancing. Leigh's being hard on you, but it's working, but maybe it's not, the only reason that I'm doing anything I'm doing is because I started putting myself out there. And the only reason I started putting myself out there back 15 years ago is because I decided I'm not taking any more auditions. I'm just going to set fire to my career and talk about whatever I want to talk about. And I don't care but I was so concerned. It's like, freelancing, trying to, at least my experience of it, I was just trying to be, likable to everybody and not step on any toes or color outside of the lines at all. And the irony is, as soon as I started coloring outside of the lines, I started getting better work. I started playing better gigs because all of a sudden I was interesting. I was just, and I never intended to do any of that. But it's, if you're worried about putting yourself out there, anything I do and have done is just as a result of me saying, I don't care what people think of me, and I'm just gonna do this. And that's easy to say now because I've been doing it for so long, but it's a tricky thing. But I think it's valuable to see someone, because one would think, oh, you're in the New York Philharmonic, you're like, you're playing for the, well, I don't know if the Yankees, love them or hate them, or you're playing for the Golden State Warriors or whoever, but it's just cool to hear. I think that's valuable.
I think of it very much as a strength, at least knowing, as I know myself, and every person is going to be different, but that self-doubt and the self-criticism, all of those things, I use that as a tool so that I don't get complacent about how I'm playing. Instead of going, okay, this will be fine, I go, let's really, look deep, second guess that it's going to work. That can go too far and that can be destructive. And I think I was there. It got very dark for some of those years where stuff wasn't working. But part of that, and you can draw on that as a strength, is not getting complacent. And I see so many people who won't take criticism well, won't take comments well, and then they're surprised when they're not advancing or doing well in things because they're unwilling to take a hard look or to doubt that what they already know is sufficient, or I think I play just fine. Okay, good luck with that in life as a worldview. That for a lot of people who are insecure or feeling not great about their abilities, the stick-to-itiveness to sort of push through that and use that to motivate you, I think is a valuable tool.
Well, I've been so inspired to see, it's kind of like more of a younger generation thing, although I guess Joe Conyers does it too, but the Instagram practice channel thing. I think it's so interesting how people use that as like an accountability tool. I've talked to so many players that they have a practice channel and they use that in just the act, because that's so applicable to like your life as an auditioning musician. Let's actually work on something and play quasi in public, or let's get something that's, and at least, talking to people about that, it seems like there's quite a supportive network that's built up, maybe too supportive in some cases if you're really trying to like get into the top group. But I just think that's a cool trend that's been going on for some time now. That I think there are a lot of negatives of technology, but there are some positives too. Obviously, what we're talking about with IMSLP or digital curation of teaching. But I think it's cool to see people help.
Is that I'm not familiar with it, but I'm not plugged in with social media things. But does he?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So people submit like a video, or they somehow share it with Joe, or it's people who already have their own community of people?
Well, it's two things. With Joe in particular, it's cool. He's actually has been having people submit, and he kind of gives them a feedback, a mini lesson. But something I've been seeing, that's right, and good for you for staying off social media. You're a much happier human for that. But a lot of younger bass players, every day they post a video of what they're practicing. So if they're working on Heldenleben 9, they post it and wherever it's at. But they try to work up to it. That's the end of their practice session, is posting that, and then people comment and whatever. I just thought, what a cool way to use that, and it's quite common. I don't do it just because I'm not doing that in my life, but I've talked to a lot of players, particularly people in their 20s, where that's just and even actually Steve Metcalf, who's principal bass of Colorado at the moment, he was doing that back when he was auditioning. So people have been doing it for a while, but I mean, it's pretty common for someone in music school right now they're just, oh yeah, I posted this to Instagram. Not it might not even be their personal account. It's just their bass practice.
I mean, maybe that's a generational thing. I would be so uncomfortable with it. But it seems like, if you grew up just posting about yourself all the time, I'm doing this, everybody should know about it. You get more comfortable. So that's certainly beneficial. If you're the kind of outgoing person who is comfortable enough to do that, that's great, because nothing makes me more nervous than when you can simulate this too really effectively. And I think for introverts who maybe are that's not going to work for me, you put the camera in front of yourself and you say, this is one take. And I get so nervous, with that versus when I was just running it. Or just take yourself to a different room in your place, apartment, house, play somewhere that you don't normally play, and put the record button on. You'll feel like you're on a stage in some totally different environment. And that's a great way to get a peek at, what it's going to be like when you get there and the nerves are going. And if you're a little too shy to put it out in front of the whole world, you can there are some half measures there, I think, that can be of use.
Yeah, for sure. You get so much out of just that little red button being on. I started using this practice app called Modacity a few years ago, and they've got this really simple interface, and one of it is there's just this button that says record. It's got a timer that's counting down how long you've been on the item you're on, and then a little microphone, and that's it. And I went from never recording myself to recording myself multiple times every practice session, because it's just staring me in the face. It's like, how long have I been working on this? And oh yeah, I should record myself. And I got much more into the habit of doing that. And it's yeah. Blake Hinson, actually, I was talking about this with him 3 years ago. I was in New York City just doing some interviews, and he I think does that with his he was talking about recording a lot, but with his students video, I think, and slowing it down and stuff.
He's very plugged in. So yeah, he would probably do, I feel like he ran that by me at some point where he was like, check it out. You can slow it down and look how in slow motion. I thought you were going to mention bringing up Blake Hinson, another great thing he does is that and maybe he's already said this on one of your previous ones, he has 3 friends who are all, I think he met them at Curtis. So they're already good, excellent bass players. When they were doing their audition prep, they would record a video and they would send it to the other 3 and be like, here, I'm doing one take, I have to do it. Or they would all agree like on a certain fixed time, we're all going to record whatever it is now. Boom, one take. And that was the accountability. So, within like a safe group, that's pre-YouTube for everybody. But yeah, those kinds of recording tactics.
Yeah, in a way that might be, and when we're talking about the high level stuff, like we're like getting into the New York Philharmonic or something, like let's send this to 3 people who are also knocking on the doors. That's because in a way, and this is like maybe the downside. I think especially maybe earlier as you're developing, just posting on Instagram is great, but I do think there's a danger in just like everybody praising everybody. If you're really trying to like if you're trying to get into the Olympics, you don't want just everybody to say, hey, good job, participation trophy, that kind of thing. I think that can be great for motivation, and maybe during the pandemic that it's awesome. But when we're getting into like that really competitive level, I think sending it to 3 friends whose opinion really holds some weight. That's a good way to do it. Probably a better way.
You need the advantage of having 3 people who are also exceptional bass players. So that's we're talking to a select group of people already. But even with people, as long as you can get people who will be honest with you. So they maybe an even higher stakes one, I would be terrified to do this, would be to send to your non-musician friends and be like, hey, listen to this. What do you think? I mean, I got the most honest and valuable feedback from just when I would play for my wife before a thing. And she'd go, why does that sound so weird? I'm like, well, it's harmonics. They're a little weird like that. She's like, can you make them also sound good like the other part? I'm like, oh, okay. I've never would have thought of that as like the tone quality of my harmonics. But those are the opinions. Yeah. You play for your non-musician friend. That's probably what it's like for a flute player to listen in on a bass committee, or I'm trying to just think of different register, clarinet, to see bass excerpts and to have the standards they have. I mean, I played for a bassoon friend once, and she said, "Wow, you're really just late with everything. Like, so you guys don't have to start the note. Like, it can just kind of be." I thought, well, no, I don't want to do that. But for them, the concept of immediacy and what they're listening for can be so totally different from what we habitualize. Mm-hmm. So that's another, playing for non-major people, that was an important part of me getting where I was, aside from, great instruction from actual bass players. But that's something that you can get as long as you can trust people to be honest and not just pat you on the back. And I think that's the one danger with the social media feedback loop, is you only get, no one wants to say anything that isn't just great job, who wants to be a jerk. But sometimes you need the more honest approach.
Yeah, that's when you need the closed loop network, the private network of people. But yeah, some of my most the eye-opening comments or mind-opening comments were from non-bass players, like playing some sort of Heldenleben. I don't know why I keep bringing up Heldenleben, but it's like, all right, I couldn't hear any of those pitches. It's like, oh,
you're like, whatever. You're not supposed to. That's not the point of the excerpt.
Oh. Isaac, I could chat forever. My wife just rolled in, so I should probably get some dinner going. But we got to do a round 2 sometime, sir. That would be fantastic. In non-pandemic times, I'm trying to make it a yearly trip to New York City, because I could go every month and not run it. But I've been getting really into these. Going to a place for a week and just bringing my microphones and seeing concerts and talking to people. I did that in Australia in 2019, and the plan is to get out of the house and do more of that whenever travel happens. So I'd love to meet up sometime when concerts are back.
In human form, we can do it. And
in human form. Zoom is great, but yes.
Yeah,
so I look forward to
we'll
that.
Definitely do.
Sure.
Maybe by then we'll have an organized place for people to share their music, or we'll have, there'll be some relevant topic to tackle. There'll be new additions.
Isaac, thank you, sir. Great chatting with you. Folks, check out those links. I'm sure you've spent time on IMSLP. I feel ridiculous saying check out IMSLP, but check out his profile page, that other profile page, Thingy Person, and get in touch with him if you want to get involved. Check out his Bach edition, all the good things. And yeah, what a cool conversation that he's done. He's done 2 things, well, many more than that, I'm sure, but 2 things that would warrant that I would be satisfied with them as like a complete career. Like all that work on IMSLP, oh my goodness, what a benefit that is to the global bass music community, but bass community as well, talking specifically here. And then being a bassist in the New York Philharmonic, whoa, that's incredible. And the path and the struggles and all of that we dug into. So round 2 for sure. I am, what am I? What I thought I had I try not to edit these outro episodes. I had something important to share and I lost it. Oh my goodness. I'm recording these in a really weird time. I'm taking off for Seattle this weekend. My first time out of San Francisco in 14 months, I guess. Are we coming up here? And so I'm trying to bang these out early in the week just because I have a 6 a.m. flight to Seattle on Friday. So I'll be gone for a few days and just trying to, this podcast machine continues on. It's crazy. I can't believe that we've been doing 2 episodes a week since 2016, the beginning of 2016. By the way, if you ever think about starting a podcast, I would highly recommend not putting out 2 episodes a week. It's madness. It's a lot of work. It's just what has been done. That may change in the future, but that has just been the pace of conversations. That just seems to be what works out. It's felt a bit busy on my end personally during the pandemic, and I have a much larger role at the company I work for, Eastman Music Company, Eastman Strings. So it's been a little trickier to fit these in than normal, but I know that we're going to be getting back to conferences. We're going to be getting back to travel. And what happens is when I go out of town, again, I feel like I'm dreaming of some distant past. I'm really just thinking about a year and a half ago, but I connect with a lot of people and I come home with like 20, 30 interviews, and I just don't like to sit on things for months and months. I know a lot of other podcasters do, but I feel like it's exciting to talk to people and I want to get that conversation out relatively soon. And I just feel like things go, I don't want to say they go stale because we talk about a lot of evergreen things in this podcast, but there is a certain factor. It's like you lose the momentum or something if you wait 6 months and sit on something. I especially felt that once the pandemic hit and I had all these conversations talking about travel and future plans and blah, 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 that I was then putting out while everybody was sheltered in place around the world. So not that that's a reason to not sit on things. I 2 a week feels right, but I wouldn't advise it. If you were starting something new like a podcast or even blogging or a YouTube channel or something like that, 1 piece of content a week is a nice flow. Any talk I've done, that's usually my recommendation for folks, but everybody finds their own lane. All right, I'm babbling. Gonna get out of here and thank the team who are Michael Cooper, Steve Henchy, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've got some cool episode plans coming up here. Mitch and I just started talking about that. Some new stuff, and anytime Mitch has an idea for an episode, it's always a great idea. So can't wait for that. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we'll see you again soon. Is that my line? Oh, goodness, Jason. Oh, I'm out of my rhythm. We will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.